Hello, everyone. And as I promised, we have some streams. Especially, I know that I promised to Gina Charlton. Gina, hey, hello. I promised we had some action. And yeah, I have a special guest that I have been chasing for a while. We have been in the same conferences and events for a while and never get a chance to really talk and have this streamed conversation. Daryl Ferris, welcome very much. How
Thank
are you?
you. I'm very well. How are you?
Good, nervous, but I'm not interviewed here, so that doesn't matter too much this time.
I know my place.
No, don't worry. Later we can switch and do a reverse interview where I'm gonna be the victim. But this time you're the victim. And opening question, as usual, for everyone. Please share with the audience for the ones that do not know you. What's up with you? Who are you? What are you doing?
Sure.
What's up with you?
Awesome. So, hi everyone. I'm Daryl Ferris, and I'm the field CTO at Mabel.com. Mabel is a low-code automation platform. We do things like front-end UI automation, API testing, performance now. We just released a
I just
nice
heard.
little load testing offering, accessibility testing. So really growing into a full-stack quality engineering platform.
And that's more a little bit around Mabel, what you're doing today. But I'm always curious, like, what's your origin story, the radioactive script that did you, or how did you start it? How did you
How did
came
I
up
get
to be?
started? I started early. So I guess my origin story probably begins when I was maybe 16 or 17 years old.
Oh wow.
And I got internet access for the first time, and it was through a Unix shell account.
Cool.
And
Dial-up modem.
yeah, dial-up modem, all the sounds, all the good things, and right around that time was when the web started becoming graphical. And I remember reading that the White House had launched a website. You can go to whitehouse.gov, and at the time, my only web browser was Lynx. Which is all text based.
Mm-hmm.
And then I learned that there was a PPP emulator called Slurp, and that was the first time I ever really built code. I had a Commodore 64 when I was very little, and I wrote basic stuff. But this was really the first time that
Basic, literally, right?
yeah, literally. Yeah, the first, maybe my origin story goes way back. So I used to love the strobe light room at Chuck E. Cheese.
Okay.
So you put a quarter in and it makes a strobe light. There's a mirror, and I would just dance in front of the mirror.
Cool.
And so I wanted to figure out, hey, how can I reproduce this at my house? And so on my Commodore 64, I basically just figured out the timing to flash the screen black and then flash it white until it would freeze motion. And so my bedroom was a great place to be in the early days, just a constant dance party.
How old were you then?
Oh gosh, 6 or 7.
And you were already programming the Commodore to do
Yeah.
those things?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, back in the 80s.
I mean, I know it's kind of basic program just to flip and the duration, but still at those ages is like, wow. I mean, I didn't even know very well how to manipulate a VCR or something like that.
Well, programming a VCR was probably more complex.
Wrong example, yeah.
But it was interesting, right? Yeah, I grew up with computers and was always kind of fiddling around with my Commodore 64. But it wasn't that I was some sort of prodigy child or something with computers. Back in the 80s, we had magazines, some called Byte Magazine, Family Computing, and they used to have programs, code in the magazine. And the idea was that you type out the
Copy it.
code from the paper, so you're copying it. And my mom and I spent a lot of time for years taking turns at the keyboard typing things.
The original Stack Overflow.
Yeah, kind of. And but doing that, you start inferring what these different things that you're just typing in a rote way actually do. And that, I think, gradually as I learned more, and the Commodore 64 especially had a great user manual that taught you all kinds of cool things to do with sound and music and graphics. And yeah, so maybe that's where my origin story begins.
But that's on IT in general.
Mhm.
How's the leap to QA?
To QA. So I primarily had been working professionally at that time, more on like server backends, configuration management. The first thing I ever automated was a build and deployment system because back then there weren't off the shelf products, like we have so many
Crazy
today.
complex.
Yeah, so everyone had to build their own stuff. And so that was the first time that I maybe kind of got closer to an actual development pipeline. Um, but I sort of randomly fell into QA. I had a friend of mine, Kareem Sully, who at the time was working for a company called Atom Films, which was later acquired by MTV.
Hmm.
And she sent me a message one day. She and I had worked together at a couple of companies previously. She sent me a message, "Hey, I'm hiring a QA engineer. Um, do you want to come work with me again?" I'm like, "Sure. What's QA?" And so I, she's like, "I'll show you." And so that's ultimately how I learned. Is
Suddenly you're a QA and you don't
yeah.
even know what's the deal.
Well, and I'd fallen in prior to that. And I don't include this because I was terrible at it, but I did have a QA job prior to that. I was just terrible at it. And I was at Microsoft on Windows 2000, and I was doing application compatibility testing. So essentially, installing Windows 98, installing a bunch of applications, using them, setting preferences, and then updating to Windows 2000 and seeing what happened. And
Interesting.
it was cool.
And Windows 2000, that was must have been an experience.
It was a great operating system.
I think you're being sarcastic, but
A little bit.
because I mean, silly parenthesis is like Windows or Microsoft's one good one, awful one, good one,
Yeah.
awful one, and I think 2000 was one of the.
Well, it's interesting because, I was working on a lot of consumer facing applications, and Windows 2000, and I hope it's okay to say this 20 years later, Windows 2000 was supposed to be the convergence of Microsoft's server based and consumer based operating systems.
Like
As
the
I
attempt with
understood.
NT going to XP and all those things, right?
Exactly.
I mean, that's no
And
secret. They have been trying to do that for a while.
well, what was happening is that a lot of the bugs we were finding, not me because I wasn't finding bugs because I didn't know what I was doing. A lot of those bugs, especially in games, were getting marked won't fix. And if you do that enough times, then all of a sudden you realize, like, oh my gosh, we can't run any games that anyone are playing because no one wants to fix the bugs. And then if I'm remembering right, that's when I want to say Windows Millennium might have gotten
Ooh,
released right
another
around there. Yeah, because it was
interesting
basically
one.
like we need something for consumers, and so that's when you sort of ended up with this, kind of hopscotch of bad operating systems until we had XP.
I think XP was a good land, and then Vista, then 7. 7 was
Yeah.
okay, then 8, who no one even remembers about it, and then
10 was
10,
another big shift.
it's
Yeah.
decent. And I haven't experienced 11, but I'm not there yet, ready psychologically. And that's interesting because video games and checking what is integration and catches my attention that you were not installing it on the new Windows, but you were like upgrading with the game already inside or the program. And I'm sure all sorts of DLL hell
Yeah.
may have been around. And when you arrived, was it already MTV or soon to
No,
be?
we were acquired while I was there. I've gone through a lot of acquisitions in my career. I think I'm a good luck charm in that regard.
Huh. Stay tuned. um, yeah, silly question you just mentioned. How many acquisitions have you been through?
Oh gosh.
Oh, wow. You have to count it that bad.
Maybe 5 or 6.
Wow. That's pretty high.
1 or 2 IPOs.
Wow. I think I've been 2, maybe 3, depending on how you see it. But wow, 5. Okay, that's yeah. You definitely hire him now.
Well, it was a time, in the first two .com booms, right? Lots of people were building things for the first time, and as I
Mm,
think we started approaching the crash, and coming out of it, there was just a lot of mergers, acquisitions.
survival
Yeah,
situations. I remember, and yeah, I deviated a little bit there. So, what were you testing there? What was the task in not yet MTV?
Atom Films.
Adam,
Yeah, video
and on
streaming.
films.
Yeah, video streaming. So Atom Films was one of the first platforms where filmmakers could publish their content and have it be streamed out. Atom Films was different than something, say, like YouTube is today, where anybody can upload anything. Everything at Atom Films was reviewed, curated. We signed licensing agreements with the content creators.
Like having it on Netflix today. Like
Yeah.
no one can just upload there, right?
So it was, yeah. So we were very much like a legitimate film arm. We had people doing those contracts. We worked with some really early comics post acquisition. Mike Birbiglia was one, or
Oh,
he had some shorts. There was yeah.
and
It
what
was
was
a
being
great time.
tested on those things?
Basically, can we stream the content
Mhm.
naturally? There was essentially a homegrown CMS that was driving all of this in the back end, so we had to test that.
CMS, content management system.
I
for
love
whoever.
content management systems, one of my favorite kinds of software. But yeah, we essentially, every day was new content. So we released, the homepage would change, and so
Every day.
every day.
What year was this?
2000-ish, I
Okay,
think.
and a
I'll
web
have to look
page
at
updating
LinkedIn.
every day. I mean, not being news, not being that's wow.
Yeah, well, it was interesting, right? Because there wasn't a whole lot of video streaming
Mhm.
in those days, especially of really good content. And Atom Films was cool because there was a ton of animation. We had horror, lots of things. And post acquisition, when MTV bought us, they ended up slotting us underneath Comedy Central, and so we kind of shifted and became more of a clearinghouse for comedy content, and a lot of the other genres went away,
Huh.
which was a little sad. But it was a fun ride for sure.
And I mean, being part of Comedy Central must have been fun, interesting things.
We actually, one thing that we had tried was to take some of the online content and fit it into a 30 or 60-minute TV show that they
Mhm.
actually showed. So we had a Atom Film showcase on Comedy Central. I don't think it did very well. I'm pretty sure it aired at something like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
Because Adam Films rings a bell. I remember seeing something. Even the logo,
Yeah.
very much remember it. But yeah, as you say, wasn't that long. But from there, like stream tests, that's a huge beast, and you were like spearheading the effort, I'm sure, because on 2000s, I didn't even like, oh my God, there's an MP3. I was like, and you are already streaming. Wow.
Cool.
And what came after? What has been like the next learning or
Well,
QA experience?
yeah. After that, a couple of just a kind of meandering through testing a little bit. I did some consulting work, and uh, the next job that I think really stands out for me in terms of testing was at bedandbreakfast.com, which was another acquisition. HomeAway acquired them while I was there. I think we were maybe their 13th or 17th acquisition that year. It was crazy.
Whoa.
But I was testing software that innkeepers used to basically take their bookings, distribute their availability. So if I run a bed and breakfast, I could get my open nights on something like Expedia or some other.
This
Oh,
totally sounds like
GDS.
Airbnb.
Airbnb came to be while I was at bedandbreakfast.com, and there was a big to do because innkeepers, they pay a lot of the same taxes that hotels do, and so it's a high cost business for them, and they people weren't making people weren't getting rich off of their Airbnbs at the time, and Airbnb came in and was very much a disruptor. And the innkeepers were, very aware that the people renting out their extra bedroom, or in some cases, now, which I think is most common, their entire
The whole
homes,
place, yeah.
weren't paying those same taxes, and had just a different perception of overhead. So yeah, very much. It was that era where Airbnb was very disruptive.
Booming and
Yeah.
over there, what type of testing or QA practices
Mhm.
were you kind of conducting? Because Stream is behind
Yeah.
now.
Well, this is where I think, if I remember right, the first time I ever tried automation. And much to my chagrin, I was testing a Win32 based application. And there weren't really great tools for that. If anybody remembers AutoIt, um,
Was it like the coordinate clicking automating?
yes, some of that was. Some of it was using, sort of the back-end component controls. If you had standard components.
That created the proxy for the objects, right? I
Yeah.
remember some of those.
But where it fell apart is that it didn't work very well. But what I realized that I was doing through the course of this, I hit a moment where I said, I feel like I'm re-implementing the Win32 API in order to do this.
Because you pretty much had to
testing.
hack it, right?
Yeah. And it just seemed like a very bad idea. Like, philosophically, once I'm doing this, I'm like, this just doesn't seem like the right thing to do. So it didn't go very far, but I think hitting that obstacle just made me want to figure out better ways to automate in the future. And then I was, happy after that to be back on web-based applications, which just had better tooling available to them.
It's kind of easier to control them because the objects are public. You can see the HTML.
Exactly.
And I remember the headache with Windows application or desktop applications. Like it's compiled. It's like in there, like control it however you can to automate on it. And it's something that can become a big pain in the behind, because as you said, you were pretty much having to hack or re-engineer the software to be able to automate it, which is valid. Some organizations create a very good like framework to be able to automate their own software, but most of the others don't care or actually don't want to automate them. So
well, and it was especially challenging, right? Because I think, like so many testers, I was a team of one.
Okay, yeah, that's another one.
And so, efficiency, I think, became a really big concern as well, both just on the effort to automate, but also if I'm spending all of this time trying and failing to automate, is that, having negative consequences on the actual testing part?
You're having more problems than the defects that you're detecting.
Yeah.
That's so common. Everyone here, most probably. What tool should I use? What should I get? Or how can I automate this? But I think it's great that it gave you as well like this understanding how to go to the backend, because many is just like I want to record and replay something that's quick, but that limits many QA friends that are having those difficulties. That I only know the tool. No, you can. Why don't you even build something or talk to the developers nowadays in the modern days? That's so needed, right?
It is.
And well, to not to dive too much on that because that's another rabbit hole. Then what happened in between Mabel and Airbnb?
Well,
I know already several acquisitions in between, but
I know my LinkedIn profile is very long. The next job that stands out to me, that I think gets us closer to today, was my previous job to Mabel, which is at a company called Native Instruments. And Native Instruments makes music hardware and software, so DJ equipment, keyboards,
cool.
And they're all connected by a system of services in the back end. So one of the product that we were working on, brand new, greenfield, nothing had ever been done. Native Instruments is an old company. I was downloading cracked versions of their software when I was a very young lad, and so strong brand. Anyone in music knows who Native Instruments is. So it was an honor to work there and build a new team from the ground up. And was the first time in my career that I had a choice in tooling, because we were starting from scratch. So I had used Selenium for some years by that point, and kept hitting the same stumbling blocks or challenges, and more on the framework side than anything else. And had heard that there was finally some new tools coming to market. Right, DevOps had kind of become entrenched by that point. Everyone had pipelines, and things were automated and whatnot. It was a beautiful thing.
When they managed to get there.
When it worked.
Yeah.
And so we knew that we would need some sort of test automation, and I wanted to try something different. So was playing with WebDriver IO at that time, which was good. It was a great wrapper. Had some nice convenience methods and things like that, but was still hitting like just goofy, unexplainable stumbling blocks. Like, oh, it's working on Chrome, now it's not working on Firefox, or
It's more buggy than the bugs that it was detecting.
it's like, oh, I just updated, a new browser just came out. Let me update that. Oh, now I have to update Chrome driver. Oh, now that just blew something else up, and it was frustrating, very frustrating. So I was listening. Joe Colantonio had begun his Test Talks podcast by that point, and I was listening to an episode, and I heard, I think he had maybe Dan Belcher or Izzy Azari, our two co-founders, on one of his podcasts, and we're talking about Mabl. And part of that was, hey, come to Mabl.com, download a trial, and check it out. So I said, okay. So I downloaded it, and I had been working on a test, as I mentioned, that I could get running in one browser but not the other, and just goofy stuff. So that was the first thing I tried when I downloaded Mabl, and I had it working in 10 minutes. And I'm like, wow, this is cool. And so my DevOps counterpart sat next to me, and so I tapped on the shoulder, come look at this. And
look, it works.
Yeah, look at this thing, it works. And so he kind of slides over, and he sees the dashboard, and it's lots of graphs and charts and things. And he's, whoa, this looks like a DevOps tool. I'm like, yeah, it kind of does, doesn't it?
Sure,
interesting, neat. And so, can we wire this up in Circle CI? I'm like, yeah, here's some docs. 10 minutes later, I have automated a test, and it is in a pipeline. And we just kind of looked at each other, and we're like,
this could work.
This could work. And I had a really great experience working with the Mabl team. I think they're still are very much a feedback-driven culture. So is my team. I think there was a lot of similarities in how our teams operated. And so when it came time for me to look for something new, I thought to myself, like, what could I work on? Like, if I had my choice, what would I work on? And I just kept coming back to Mabl because I had played around with so many different automation tools by that point, and didn't have as quick of an initial success with anything as I did with Mabl. And so I said, well, if I had my choice, I would go work on this thing that might make testers' lives better, and give more actionable insight. They were and still are very focused on, testing is great, but what does it mean for customers? What does it mean for your users? How can you provide the best experiences? And having worked at many strong branded companies in my career, which is always attractive to me, I knew that, I wanted something that was not only going to test our software, but I wanted something that was also going to protect our brand.
Mm-hmm.
And so I, reached out to Dan and Izzy and said, hey, I'm looking, in the market for a new job. I remember very fondly our experiences working together. I have no idea what I could do for you, but I have this really broad skill set. Any
What
possibility?
do you think?
Yeah, what do you think? And so struck up a conversation, and I became Mabl's first solutions engineer, and also started working on the go-to-market, or essentially the sales side of a company for the first time in my career.
How was that transition? Because it's from being in the back end to going to the front end, pun intended or analogy. It's weird, right? Or
it was less weird than you might think,
because he's a natural for these type of things, and
no, it's because our Mabl's customer base is other testers, other engineers, and those were my people. I'd been in working in cross-functional teams at multiple companies at that point. Like we were very early agile adopters as well. So yeah, everything just gelled. So
Because being in front of the people and having the conversations that you're already having anyway, I think that's why it kind of goes natural, right?
yeah. Well, I think one thing as testers or software engineers, you can probably abstract this in a number of ways, but at some point in our careers, you reach a point where you have a lot of common experiences, and so for me, it was each conversation with a new potential Mabel user was me, hey, so have you done automation before? What kind of problems did you have? And I'm a bridge builder, and so for me, it's like, well, how can Mabel help, or can Mabel help? And I love hearing the stories. I love talking to testing teams. I love talking to software teams, just to find out what they're doing, what they've tried, what they failed at, what worked, what didn't, and see if there's some kind of bridge between paradigms.
Truly pay attention and close the loop
Yeah.
in communication.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned, now let's talk a little bit about Mabel and what you are doing or helping, and lastly the new offers, because I want to talk about those as well. But yeah, I mean, you're kind of closing the loop, bringing more information, but the solutions, what else is like that you're helping around?
Yeah. So I'm the field CTO is a new role for me at Mabel. Prior to that, I was the first and only solutions engineer. Then I created a solutions engineering team and started managing that. We began a technical account management program, so having TAM. So I initiated the first TAM program and did hiring for that. Built out that team, so I was managing two teams.
Oh,
When I moved into the field CTO role, we migrated the TAMs over to report to another manager, and I'm still managing the solutions engineers.
and that's why you also kind of the feedback, please stream it into kind of based on the original experience.
Absolutely, yeah. That's why yes, I love speaking at conferences and all of that stuff, but I'm not speaking at QA or the Highway this year. Someone on my team, Sarah Geisinger, is.
Which
for
is
me,
at the same time of my talk. I wanted to go and see
this
what.
always happens.
Yeah.
I wish I could be on the programming committees for these things, so I could just say, no, I want to go to these talks, so these can't be scheduled.
So put them at the, yeah, but that would be for your. I'm sure someone on the committee is doing the same, and like, I want to go this, so let's put them in. The rest, let's stack them up. Um, no, sorry that I interrupted. By some of these solutions, I know a few from Mabel. Can you quickly like list them so that the audience knows the solutions or offerings?
So primarily, I think from the beginning, Mabel was focused on UI-based functional testing, so testing, as a user would through their experience. We then added on API testing, which is compatible with Postman, so you can bring in your Postman collections. Tons of people, me included, have used Postman over the years, and I've invested a lot in that. So making those portable and giving them a place to run. We added on accessibility testing, which I think we did very elegantly. And now, most recently, we launched load testing, kind of our first stab at performance testing.
And I'm curious on that one. What is it replicating a bunch of APIs, or are you using the browser-based solution?
So today we launched API performance testing first, so it's all API based. The next step at that is going to be kind of then taking your functional UI test and using those as load tests. So the way that Mabel put this together is because we already had an API testing capability. The idea was to take your existing API test and then turn those into performance tests. And just through talking to users, a lot of folks naturally use JMeter. And one of their pains is that, we have to manage this other set of tests now that are JMeter specific. And so it just becomes it's more of a load, like it's kind of load testing your team. Like, okay, well, we have to do this kind of testing and that kind of testing and this and this. So how can we do all of that or more of that, but more efficiently? And one of those is, well, being able to repurpose some of your existing tests in a different modality.
It's interesting, and it's for load testing as well, not only performance and monitoring.
Primarily load.
Because that's an interesting one. I generally am against using functional tests for load testing because functional is doing some other things. You don't want all the negative validation, blah blah blah, in a load test. But there's a good point. As you mentioned, you already have the API calls. You can, on the performance side, remove the validations or things that you don't need,
Yep.
and quickly come up without being asked to have to ask the developers or your Swagger or what do I send? Why do it's in the script. You already have it. I think that's an interesting advantage. But as well, I would be everyone watching, be careful. Don't just migrate functional into performance because that is no bueno, no. Yeah. So and especially for load tests, because if you are going to have a bunch of automations multiplying and doing functional validations, that's not
Exactly.
performance,
The
right?
validations are less important than the actual actions that the test, are taking.
We want to send stuff to the API and time it. Uh, if the functional automations work well, we know that they work well. We don't have to validate anything. And on the browser one, when do we expect to see some news around browser performance?
Later this year.
Okay,
Yeah.
stay tuned because that's gonna be interesting. Would you? I mean, I don't know if you can disclose allow hybrid API
For
and
both.
browser.
I would imagine so because I don't know 100%, but I would imagine so because today already you can kind of put API steps inside of your UI test,
Mm-hmm.
which I really like because I've for some time been working on a lot of React apps, optimistically updating front ends. So you do some action, you get a little toast success.
No, and gives the possibility to invoke APIs
Yep.
from your browser tests and store stuff in other APIs. So
Exactly.
there is,
Yeah. So I'd like you can do that. You can volley back and forth, right? I do something in the front end. Now I go check the back end. Did that actually make it all the way through?
oh, that's so good.
Or vice versa, right? Because
Trigger the
other
database
APIs.
API. Did you store it? Do you have it?
Yeah.
Good.
And vice
Ah,
versa, right? I'm going to go make some update in the API because we have third-party integrations that are making direct API updates. So if I go change something in the back end, refresh the page, does that then come back up? Or some more end-to-end scenarios, but really kind of this hybrid testing where you're looking at front end and back end together in concert,
wow.
um, which is fun and
I never thought about those possibilities. Like quickly check the backend to make sure that things were stored, that your scripts are working, that the process is working. Wow, that's pay attention to this, man. That's interesting processes or ways to approach testing. That I'm right now all the implications. That's interesting.
well, there
You
was
just blew my mind.
there was context for that because we were using an optimistic front end, and so just because the front end is telling you that something is good is not reflective of reality at all. It's just like, oh, the user did something, let's give them some fast feedback, and you're like, okay, well,
Looks
what if it was accurate feedback? What would that be like? And so
because
it becomes a testing job.
a few times I have been in like, yeah, it says it returned the validation on the front end says it's good, but wasn't storing anything. That's a big one. That's why I just thought of in the past. If I well, there were not that many APIs to check on that in the past, so but probably could create my own and trigger it and check the database. But
Yeah.
now the hamster is another channel. And I just noticed that we extended a little bit more than I promised. And amigo Daryl, to close it up and give the people an opportunity. When can they? Where can the audience reach out to you to find out more about you and if they want some help with Mabel or some other things?
Yeah.
Where can people find you?
Well, LinkedIn is probably the easiest place. Just look me up, Daryl Ferris. There aren't. I think I'm the
The-
only one.
yeah.
So easy to find. If you're interested in learning more about Mabel, shoot me a message or just go to mabel.com, MABL, and download a trial. It's a 2-week trial, free, and you can experiment and play with it yourself and see what it feels like.
What is next for you?
What is next for me?
Where may I walk into you next time?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I've been trying to send more people on my team to conferences so they can learn more and interact with users and things like that. So I've been opting to take a step back and let them go. But I'll be here. I may be at Agile DevOps West
West?
in Vegas.
Next week?
Yeah, there's a possibility.
See you there, everyone.
There's a possibility.
Uh,
And beyond that, I'm not sure. But
Because after that, I think it's kind of like the
A little
high
all
season
until
of
fall.
conferences gets. So everyone stay tuned. Pay attention to what Daryl is doing or where he's going. And we'll stay tuned because most probably we will do a replay next week from Vegas if it comes as you say. And well, my presentation will be soon here at QA or the Highway. So I'm not sure if we're gonna have another stream. I always say that, and always I turn up with something else. But stay tuned. Otherwise, we'll see you next week at Agile DevOps West in Vegas. And stay tuned because it's gonna be crazy over there as usual.
it's Vegas.
Yeah, and it won't stay in Vegas. It will be streamed. So, amigo, thank you very much for coming. Everyone, see you around. See you soon or next week, depending on how things go. Take care. And this was QA or the Highway from Columbus, Ohio, with Daryl Ferris. Thank you, amigo.
Thank you, amigo.
Time to stop this.